Well, good afternoon. I can say to everybody across the country now, it's 12 o'clock here in LA. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Surf Sessions, session number 6 for the year and 6 in total. I'm super excited to have Luke Droulez here from PAX. Luke, welcome to Surf Sessions.
Thank you for having me.
Mate, thank you for joining. Really excited to dig in today on some questions for you around what you're doing in the digital marketing and marketing general realm there at PAX. But by way of brief introduction for everybody, first of all, I'm Anthony. I'm the head of sales here at Surfside. And Luke, as I mentioned, is the VP of DTC, direct to consumer, and wholesale at PAX. And Luke, I know you've been there over 3 years in that role now.
Yeah,
How's it going so far? Are you enjoying yourself?
yeah. Every day you learn something new, I'd say, whether you choose to or not. And yeah, I think we're at a very exciting time in PAX. So excited to speak with you, answer questions, kind of go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I know the company's going from strength to strength, and I have my digital marketing bias for obvious reasons. And I'm always excited to hear how successful brands are growing and the place that digital marketing plays in that, because that's my bias. So excited to learn from you today and hear from you. Mate, before we get into the specific questions, just generally, I know you just sort of touched on this a little bit, but like generally at PAX next year, in terms of what you can talk about to a more public audience, what's the thing that is the biggest or most exciting thing generally at the company next year?
Yeah, I think product innovation is probably like the theme for next year. I think PAX was definitely known for product innovation in the past, and it's been a minute. So I think expect we had a couple exciting launches this year with the Trip, our all-in-one product, which is being received well across dispensary channel, and then also just launched our new Era Pod and Pen system, and so that's kind of rolling out. So that next year you're going to see that in more of the markets in the dispensary channel, and then I think there's some exciting innovation coming elsewhere, to our namesake devices that you're going to see across head shop, smoke shop, e-com channel.
I love that. So coming back, not coming back, but having a big start to next year, you feel like you guys have been warming up to this and coming up to this. You said maybe like you're ready for this and it's time to
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's kind of like I think PAX for a minute there was more in like the brand partner model where it's like we had other brands on our platform and they would kind of manage more of the sales and marketing and we'd kind of be behind the scenes. And
Mhm.
I think, after I started I think 2022, we launched with our live rosin product. And since then we've expanded into more product lines. And so now we've become more plant touching. And I'd say that has been a good thing. I think the worst kept secret about PAX was that our products were used for cannabis. We've always kind of been a cannabis company. I think the decision to embrace that a little bit more has been more of a recent evolution. And I'd say that like what you're going to see from us, what you've seen from us this year and what you're going to see from us in the future is more, how do we think about the cannabis experience? How do we, enhance it? How do we make it better? And how do we improve consumer relationships?
Interesting. Yeah. I never really, I guess you're right. Maybe there was some hesitancy there. Now I think it from the brand to embrace cannabis, but I love the fact that that's changed and you guys are definitely like owning that now.
Yeah, yeah. And then look, I think there's various forms of plant touching is, now evolved to include hemp and, everything that comes with that. It feels like there's been a bit of an armistice in the whole hemp versus cannabis debate where, you're seeing brands from both sides switching sides. And it's kind of like, people are kind of following the money. And so I'd say that that's the other piece. So, at a bigger, plant-based wellness, if that's like the broader theme, like we're really interested in that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we sort of see it almost at the moment as the THC states and the hemp states. But anyway, that's a
Yeah.
that's another conversation. In terms of 3 years, 3+ years there, you've had a little time now to implement, your strategies and the way you want to do things there. So in terms of the core value propositions from PAX, the things you have executed on, what are those core value propositions you believe you've got into market now, and how have they, do you think, contributed to the strength of the brand so you can go into next year, off the back of that with these new product launches?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're focused on at the moment is trust. I feel like whether you are new to this or true to this, with cannabis, it's about having kind of trusted experiences. That can mean predictability in terms of like, predictability, consistency, but it also relates to like quality control. It's like, what are you using for your inputs? What are the outputs like? There's been a number of scandals and regulatory changes, et cetera. So we want to, we try to hold ourselves to higher standards. And then I think the other piece is like we're one of the few businesses that has a hardware business, but also like this consumables business. And so we're trying to marry them together, thinking about it more in terms of how do you design products to interact with one another if you have the ability to influence that. And so I think where in the past we were maybe very focused on the hardware and you saw apps and you saw features and a little bit over engineered, honestly. I think now we're thinking about like, what's the easiest, most portable ways to have these exceptional experiences and, how do we get in front of people so that there is the availability, there is the assortment that they're looking for so that you can kind of, regardless of how you choose to consume, there's something for you.
So these experiences, obviously, they're in the real world. How does digital play a role in that? How do you bridge that gap from getting people
Yeah.
engaged lead into this sort of real world ultimate experience?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, naturally, I think as anyone on the call may know, it's much harder to get in front of people. Everyone's on their phones, everyone's online, but the products that we sell are not as able to be advertised in the same way that even like crypto is or sports betting. So I think we're interested in the consumer journey, especially because people are looking at things, doing things prior to ordering online or going to a dispensary or, you know, even in some cases ordering online directly from brands or marketplaces. So I think it's something we've always been interested in, and I think we're getting a little bit better at figuring that piece out.
Makes sense. What are the, I guess with the industry changing, with PAX changing, um, there's some newer channels. I know you just touched on some of the limitations, and we know that obviously really well here in the industry we work in, which is primarily cannabis brands and retailers. That we live and breathe those restrictions every day, and they vary state by state. That said, things are generally going in the right direction, albeit slower than we'd all like. But there's new channels available, things like digital out of home. Obviously, you've got the ability now to do advertising on those third-party retail e-commerce menus where your product is sold, whether we call that commerce media or retail media. So there are, whilst there are those limitations, they are only going one direction. How have some of those newer channels like digital out of home, like on menu commerce media, how are they playing a part in you getting everything from brand awareness out there through to driving conversions?
Yeah, yeah, I think everything that's kind of like menu related, whether it be, the Surfside commerce media or the endemic platforms is great because it's the place of highest intent. And, we notice different markets have different preferences, in terms of how online people are with their ordering behavior. And so it's like being able to kind of meet the consumer where they are there and get in front of people is super useful, especially because, we don't have like a perfect eye on inventory. We don't have a perfect eye on availability from our web experience. So it's like our store locator can only do so much. So being able to more dynamically advertise where consumers are, where they can see what products they can buy is super useful. And then yeah, I'd say with like out of home, it's definitely it's interesting just to see how you can show up in and around dispensary environments. And we're still in the early days of testing, but it's certainly something that we're looking forward to doing more of next year, just to see how closely we can correlate us showing up IRL and then people showing up IRL and acting on that push or awareness.
Well, that's traditionally been a lot of the challenge, isn't it? Right, of brand awareness generally is it's great if you've got available budget to manage your full funnel. Not everyone does, and if you don't have that trackable, measurable ROI ROAS, then there's that question of, well, is this actually moving the needle? But yeah, being able to track a little bit more effectively now, being able to retarget those people that we know saw a digital out of home ad with another ad certainly makes things a little easier. In terms of, you just touched on, and this is, I know, Luke, state by state, and even within states, there's different breakdowns of this, that the e-commerce transaction, the online transaction versus the in-store. How is that, I guess, well, without getting into the details, like what states are you seeing where you're seeing more of that e-com
Yeah.
customer? And then what states are you seeing? Maybe the top two, if that comes to mind.
Yeah.
And then what are some of the states where it's still, because I know the ones from our end that we see,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's still like 80-20 or 20-80 kind of thing.
I think a lot of it has to do with weather, obviously. So if you think about like time of year and regionality in that context, if it's cold as hell outside, maybe you don't want to go to the store, or maybe you just want to make it a quick in and out pickup or delivery. So what California, for example, I think we benefit from pretty good weather year round. So you could see people are more likely to be in stores. There's also kind of more like I think in legacy markets, it's like the habit of shopping in a retail environment versus online,
Yep.
versus West, East Coast. And then I think a lot of it comes down to product availability. If you kind of know and trust the spot that you buy from in the same way that you used to back in the day, it's a lot easier to know that you can go there. Whereas I think, if there's better deals elsewhere, or there's something, there's out of stocks, those kind of things, you're more likely to kind of seek around. And
Yep.
then I'd say, with some of the a lot higher price items, like our legacy devices and stuff, I feel like ecom is still the easiest just because you get to comparison shop from like the comfort of your home. If there's weed involved, you got to be there. If there's not weed involved, it's a little bit easier. You don't really have like the time sensitivity.
That makes sense. What about, you mentioned with commerce media, you mentioned being, I think you said point of purchase was your term. Google always use that zero moment of truth, for Google search, where
Yeah.
you're actively ready to make a purchase. And some of those transact into immediate conversions, right? But there's that customer that looks online, then goes into the store. How do you think about that piece? Are you measuring in?
Yeah, I think it's there's more to be done there, honestly. I think it is kind of like we don't really, we don't have perfect visibility, so you kind of do things and then you see if they worked or not post after the fact. I think we try to keep in touch with trends just based on point of sale data to know like it's almost like what could people be looking for, and so that you can get in front of it, because I think a lot of it is like people's tastes change. Like the strain of the month this month may not be the strain of the month next month, and so I do think we're trying to do a better job of keeping in touch with those trends, because it's like you're either following the market or you're leading in. And I think we've kind of, now that we've been selling these products for a couple of years now, it's a little bit, we're focused on what's coming next. And then I think the biggest difference in e-com versus dispensary, or even wholesale versus dispensary, is just a little bit more brand control. So I think we're also very interested in how do you have people ask the right questions when they arrive at a store, or vice versa. How do you have, the people that they're speaking to feel like they know what's up?
Nice. Well, that's where the digital piece comes in, obviously, as well, right? And educating them before that. As you think about that, and you start to think about like lifetime value for a product like PAX, someone has, a good amount of time to, consider all the options that are available. So when you think about the competition, when you think about, acquiring not just the customer for the first time, but getting them for their lifetime and having a loyal long-term customer, what are the forms of media, again, with the bias here to sort of the digital marketing side piece of things, but what are the forms of media that you're using for that funnel to, we touched on a couple of them, but the top of the funnel and driving down to consideration of purchase and actual making purchase and then repurchase,
Yeah.
video, display, we talked about commerce media. What are the forms and the different channels that you're using across media types?
Yeah, I think once somebody's like on site, obviously email is super big for us, both for like conversion but also retention. I think that like it is still the easiest way to communicate with people, especially since in most cases you can't send text messages.
Mm.
We do partner with some dispensaries to do the loyalty play there, and so that's where you can do a little bit more. So that's still kind of within the digital realm. I think for top of funnel, there's still not really a silver bullet. I think we've done tests on Twitter, we've done tests on native, we've done tests on it. I think it's like if you're not there, we've noticed that it's bad. So
Mm.
it's, being there is important, even despite what the numbers say. But it's still not like it's not attractive if you were to look at it just based on the whatever metrics you define for success. And then I think some of these other it really depends how much you can bend the rules. I think we're seeing more, and this happens more on the hemp side, I think, than cannabis, but you see more and more brands bending the rules on TikTok, Twitter, Google, etc. And I think that is been sort of an interesting thing. I think with the cannabis products, it's a little bit harder just because you're confined to one state, but that has been sort of like a new thing where, it certainly caught our eye.
Are you seeing that on the social platforms from like an organic content standpoint or
Both organic and paid. I think it's been you kind of like I think everybody know it's sort of hiding in plain sight. It's like how can you how long can you last before you get kicked off? Or how can what kind of coded language? In the same way that people use the maple leaf emoji or the broccoli emoji, there's ways that you can, speak about it without speaking about it. And so I think that seems interesting because I think, yeah, we always want to have some kind of top of funnel presence, but it's sort of been like with nothing is bad, but we haven't found like that exact something yet.
so in terms of like using a social platform as sort of brand awareness and then bringing them into some sort of transactional environment, that's still
Yeah,
relative.
it's pretty solid. I think, we've had some success with on social media from our own account, from other people's accounts. So it's still there. And, obviously, you can sprinkle in some affiliate, some email. You got to like find it's get like finding little places and moments where you can show up, I think is super important because, being you can't just run the web. We can't just be shopkeepers, The website's there, obviously. There are ways that people can buy our products, but if we're not saying or doing anything whatsoever, we've definitely seen that like it's easy for people to lose focus, change their mind, buy from somebody else, especially if there's better deals available or greater product availability. It's like we're kind of the curated play. Like if you go with us, you're kind of making a certain set of choices. So
Yeah, I mean, that's something, maybe that's one of the most common things, or maybe it happens in all retail. Certainly I hear and we hear is, there's always that price conscious consumer and there's maybe always a better deal down the road. But some of the things I know you're building and you've talked about today, consumer journey, right? You've got better resources, better minds there than a lot of your competitors to really think through this from end to end. You also talked about building trust. I mean, that takes time and effort and resource and
yeah.
thought. And that's a very different road than discounting and a cheaper product, right? And I guess that's definitely the direction you got, or where you are and the direction you guys are going. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think, you could use the term premium, but we don't want to be like luxury, right? I think you don't want to be so far out of line with the market that people are like, what are they doing? Right? I think we're not there yet. But it is kind of like I don't think we'll ever be the cheapest product. And so it's like we've kind of given up the race to the bottom. Um, but I think if you're not the cheapest, you got to be pretty good. And I think that we want to be consistently good, which may not seem like much, but it seems to mean something for a lot of folks. So many people have so many bad experiences. First time, second time, 10th time that like just being able to show up, like say that you can get the same high, same type of high, same effects, same hits. It's like that. That's what we're striving for. And so I think it's like nailing the product is step one, and then kind of building everything around it is step two.
Right. Well, no, you guys are doing, I mean, you're doing an amazing job. And I think definitely setting the bar for especially your part of the industry, because there's a lot of products out there, as you know, but, what's behind them and the resources and so forth. Sometimes I question. Looking ahead, Luke, starting to look at, we're almost there, a couple of weeks to go, and it's going to be
Yeah.
25. which is exciting and amazing. And we always say time flies. It definitely did for me and for us this year over here. But, if we look at next year, uh, again, we have an interesting view on the industry because we're national and we see the good states and the bad states and
Yeah.
everything in between. But for you, for the business, where are the markets? I know you mentioned the hemp markets
Yeah.
earlier. What are the ones that are the most exciting for you and have the most upside, do you think, yes, maybe state by state next year?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we're currently in California, Colorado, New York, and Massachusetts. I think
That's a mix of
honestly,
for sure right there.
yeah, and I think we are first and foremost is focused on like getting things right in those states. I think, we've seen the same trends in Massachusetts that we have in Colorado and California. And it's like you can assume that every market, like New York right now, price of a 1 gram pod is like was over 100, now it's under 100. At some point it'll hit 50. At some point it may even hit 30. And it's kind of like you can certainly make your money in the early days, but once the good old days are gone, like what comes next? And so I think we're super focused on like how do you, survive and thrive in the markets that we are in, and then it's a lot easier to kind of take that blueprint forward. Especially now we literally just launched the new Era system, and it is so much better. And so I think it's like getting that into people's hands and giving them that experience and making sure that we get that story right is really important to us. And then our edibles, not a lot of people know we make edibles. I will say shameless plug, they're really good. And so it's like getting those into more people's hands. The trip is fantastic. I think a lot of buyers love it, especially for the disposable category, which seems to be increasingly big for every state. So it's like I think that's kind of the big focus. And there's been some changes internally on our end. So I think we're just kind of taking a beat to just get our shit together and then go after it. There's definitely markets that we're interested in, but I feel like today's interest is tomorrow's, problem. So I think that, the mistakes of the past was kind of like, okay, we're gonna go to a market and immediately become top five and then, just print cash, but it's not really like that. And so it's I think that's gonna be the big, which is good. You've mentioned a couple times like, yeah, we theoretically have the money, but once you spend it, it's gone. And I think, rather if we have a trust fund, we gotta keep it for the next generation. So I think with great resources comes great responsibility. And so that's I think what we're super focused on is you can certainly spend your way to a top one, two, three place in any market, but like how long does that last? And then what happens when the shit hits the fan? So that's kind of where that's probably been the biggest change in focus since we've gotten there. I'm always impressed by brands that started bootstrap, started with nothing, because they think the way they think and the way they approach whether it be sales or marketing is the right way. And I think like we were to have fortunate to have the advantages we do, but I think you don't want to like lose the mindset. And so that's what's been like the big change in focus for us.
No, mate, that makes sense. I mean, no one's budgets and resources are unlimited, that's for sure. Before I go to
Yeah.
my last question for you, anyone that's joining or tuning in, feel free now should have asked at the start, but certainly anytime. If you got any questions for Luke, feel free to type them in, and we'll have a couple of minutes here before we wrap at 12:30 to answer those. But yeah, I mean, those states are interesting. Like New York, from our perspective, is you just touched the prices are already starting to come down, but like any new state tends to have just some really strong tailwinds and a lot of excitement, and people are splashing money around. I feel like on the other end of that spectrum is kind of Colorado,
Yeah.
which is probably in its toughest time, I would think. Cali, where you and I sit now, from my perspective, seems to be sort of coming back. I feel like the cream is rising to the top of the good retailers and brands, and then Mass is sort of pretty good, but I'm reading about all these new licenses they're issuing there. So,
Yeah.
how do you go about, we just named four pretty significant states, but there's only four, and, there's obviously a lot
Yeah.
more states than that. So how do you folks go about tweaking
Yeah.
marketing? I mean, your whole business really, and the product to some degree, the messaging, but how do you go about tweaking it state by state for the conditions in the state today? And then, knowing that the conditions are going to be changing probably pretty rapidly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the big thing is like at the middle of everything's the brand. I think the big thing that we've tried to be mindful of is that like, you launch in the Northeast, you can't pretend to be from New England. You launch in any state, you launch in New York, like you didn't just pick up your like Long Island accent overnight. You gotta just we try to be mindful of not pretending like we were there at the beginning. Like the brand's been around for over a decade, so like we have theoretically been there since pretty early, or even before a lot of markets were legal. But we don't try to like speak in the same tone. It's like you need to resonate with the consumer, but you still need to have a point of view. And so that's been something that's important for us. And then I think we kind of like we toggle our spends up and down depending on where we think the market's going. Like if there's an opportunity, we'll spend up. If it feels like things are getting a little scary, we'll spend less. And I think we've arrived in a really good place with kind of the balance of sales and marketing when it comes to, because at the end of the day, it's like, buyers, bud tenders are just so important in addition to consumers, which is, I think, unlike other businesses. And so it's like we want to make sure we have the right balance speaking to those three groups.
It makes sense. Mate, question that's come through, and just to clarify, yes, commerce media, I'll answer the first part of the question. Commerce media, when we use that term, we refer to essentially a full funnel of advertising. So, advertising on brands and apps and also advertising on e-commerce menus. That's what we mean by that. So that's correct. Luke, if you had to choose one, is the question, general advertising on a menu, or both?
Yeah. I
What?
think it's always both. It's just like the question is how much of each. I think like, there's always if you want to use the analogy of like picking fruit, there's always the low-hanging fruit. But then once you pick that low-hanging fruit, you got to go up the branches. The funnel is very similar. And I think it's cool to see in cannabis there are things that remind you of Google search, Google shopping, Amazon. It's same verse, just a little bit different. And so those are great, but then there's also just, yeah, what's sometimes hard is I feel like you're so focused on the people that might know you or already know you, but there are still a lot of folks out there. And so I think we're fortunate that we've been around over a decade, as I said. We've had different product variations, different brand variations. We've been in a bunch of markets, we've been in a few markets, and I think that yeah, the constant is there's always going to be new folks who are kind of coming to cannabis, or people who are like, went from smoking to vaping, or vaping to edibles, or tinctures to edibles. There's so many different like switching points, and some people are like, I love all of it, right? And so you need to. I think that's what we're increasingly focused on is how are we making sure we're managing these different customer journeys.
Yep. Well, yeah, it's an ongoing job that will probably never end. Another quick question, then I've got a last one for you, myself. Question came in: how effective is your affiliate marketing structure when it comes to
Yeah.
sales, particularly through video reviewers?
I think it's an interesting question. There's probably more that we can do there. I think we've been pretty good with publishers, and we've been good with like, you know, written articles, we get good write-ups. I think we're still trying to figure out. We've done some of it. Obvious risk is codes leaking and tracking getting messed up. So I think there are solves for that, but I think it's something that we're going to explore more. I think the biggest thing that we have been holding back on is, we want to go hard when we think we have something to say. And I think we're now in a place with our product lineup where, this year we're going to have some bigger things to say and some bolder things to say. And I think that it'll be a lot easier to say it through those mouthpieces.
I love it, mate. Last thing, it's sort of what are you looking for? I mean, there's folks that are on this now, and folks that'll listen to this subsequently. Retailers, what is PAX looking for in existing and new markets? Are you looking for partners? What can we all be looking?
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily my purview, but I think we're always, it's like what you say on your LinkedIn bio. You're like, we're always open to inquiries. And I think, licensing, partnerships, nothing's off the table for next year. I think we're super interested in like how we can be better members in the community and how we can kind of, bring our what we know and what we have and kind of marry that with somebody else. So I think nothing is off the table as we're just kind of this is like the when you set your New Year's resolutions. Right now we're focusing on the self, getting our shit together, cleaning, making sure we're good, and then it'll be even easier as the year progresses to focus on new things.
Yeah, we've got to take care of yourself first, mate, before
Yeah,
others.
exactly. We're putting on our oxygen mask, and we're it's not an emergency, but we're focusing on the self because the easiest thing to improve is yourself.
Yeah, and oxygen for healing. Oxygen for healing. Mate,
Exactly.
appreciate you very much. What's the best way to get in contact with you is through LinkedIn by the sounds of it?
Yeah, yeah. Let's say LinkedIn to start, and then we'll go down the funnel. Then you might get email, then you might get my phone number. Who knows? There's the whole world ahead.
And then dinner at Felix at some point.
Yes, exactly. I will always be wined and dined. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to take me out to dinner.
We never will. Well, we'll catch you in the new year. Thanks to Jack as well for his input for this as well. And Luke, thank you, mate. Really appreciate your time and your insights. I'm sure everyone picked up some tidbits from you. And again, if people want to dig in more, they can reach out to Luke or reach out to Surfside. Mate, in the meantime, happy holidays, Merry Christmas and all that. Hope you have a bit of time off over the break. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll look forward to catching everyone for another surf session in January 2025. Until then, I wish you all well. Luke, thanks again, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.